Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Beth Heller. I'm the first selectman of our town, Woodbridge. Welcome to the April 1st, 2020 special meeting of the Board of Selectmen. PUA is recording this meeting. It is streaming live on WOGAT channel 79, as well as YouTube, which allows the public to view and listen to the meeting. Item 1 on the agenda is the first selectman's report and statement. Prior to my statement, I will now call each member present. Please signify you are present with an I as I call your name. Mika Cardozo. Joe Crisco.
Present, aye.
Joe Dye. Dwight Rowland.
Aye.
Sandy Stein.
Aye.
Okay.
And Mika
Also-
will be joining us in just a minute.
Okay.
I texted him.
Nothing from Joe Dye yet?
I can see that he's here, but I can't. This is Betsy Yagla, by the way, but maybe he's got himself on mute.
Okay, we'll hang for a minute. Also present for the record, Finance Director, Administrative Officer Tony Genovese.
Aye.
Town Council Jerry Weiner.
Aye.
Executive Assistant Jerry Shaw.
Aye.
And Assistant Administrative Officer Betsy Yagla.
Aye.
Thank you. We are live with audio only on channel 79 and YouTube. Because this is a virtual meeting, I would remind those present at our meeting to do two things. Please mute your phone when not speaking to eliminate background noise, and please state your name prior to speaking. Thank you. Now I'll begin my statement. The situation at Town Hall and at the state and federal level continues to change rapidly. Things have, of course, continued to change over the past 2.5 weeks for all of us here in Woodbridge, and I've asked for this meeting to bring you all up to speed on where things stand. I will begin by thanking our wonderful town staff and all the residents for being flexible and working together as we navigate through this global crisis. These are unprecedented times, and the situation continues to change rapidly. Unfortunately, we now have 6 confirmed COVID-19 cases here in town. Another reminder and a plea to all residents to go only out for necessary purchases such as medicines and food, and continue to practice social distancing. We must all endeavor to stay home, stop the spread, and save lives. Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is a discussion regarding Governor Lamont's Executive Order Number 7I, Section 13, regarding adoption of the 2020-21 fiscal year budget. Executive Order Number 7I provides that in part, quote, the Board of Selectmen shall authorize the budget making authority within said municipality to adopt a budget for the July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021 fiscal year, and to set a mill rate sufficient without holding votes required by charter or without complying with any in-person budget adoption requirements, including, but not limited to, annual town meetings requiring votes, referendum, and special town meetings. End of quote. Jerry will also explain Executive Order Number 7B.
This is Jerry. Just for information, is Mika on and is Joe on?
Mika is on, Jerry.
Oh, good. Okay. So
Any
Executive
Joe
Order.
Dye yet?
I'm sorry?
Joe Dye, are you on? Okay, hopefully he's listening. All right, go ahead, Jerry.
So Executive Order 7B that the governor implemented in March basically says that towns are allowed to must suspend all in-person open meetings which means that people cannot come to any of the open meetings. Now, this affects our budget process because, but as Beth mentioned, Executive Order 7I speaks in terms of the procedures the towns must follow in order to adopt a budget this year. And again, it stresses that it is not encouraging and in fact prohibiting any in-person meetings to adopt the budget. So what my interpretation of these two executive orders, and I was actually on the calls with some of the people who were working on this at OPM when these executive orders were written, is that we have as you all know, we have a preliminary budget hearing that's required by the charter. Executive Order 7I and 7B requires that the town go ahead and continue to have the preliminary budget hearing for purposes of allowing public input from residents into the proposed budget. And that meeting must continue to occur and will occur, I think, on April 20th. It's scheduled for April 20th. But it will be done virtually by some form of telecommunication, such as Zoom. I think Tony and Betsy are looking into that right now. This will give the public an opportunity to sign on to the meeting and actually participate and ask questions. Before the meeting, as is the custom with the town, the proposed preliminary budget will be sent to all households, taxpayers, for their review. And they will also, taxpayers and residents will be allowed to email questions about the proposed budget to the town in the event they cannot sign on to the Zoom hearing that we will have. So there'll be an opportunity to, number one, email questions before the preliminary budget hearing, and number two, to actually sign on to a Zoom meeting and be able to ask questions at the meeting. I don't know, the meeting is usually run by the Board of Finance Chairman, Matt Giglietti. I don't know whether he intends to actually physically be present at Town Hall for the meeting or whether he will be on telephone, but it's possible that he will be there and be shown on television, because we expect that meeting to be televised by on Channel 79 as well. Once that meeting is completed and there are no votes at that meeting, it's just an informational and question opportunity for residents. Once that meeting is completed, then the next process that we have in our charter is the annual town meeting. Executive Order 7I, as Beth mentioned when she read that statement a few minutes ago, prevents the town from holding a meeting where residents participate in person. So we cannot have an in-person annual meeting. And as a matter of fact, there is no reason to have the annual meeting. And the annual meeting is canceled because tonight, hopefully, the Board of Selectmen, in accordance with Executive Order 7B, will authorize the Board of Finance, which is the budget-making authority in our town, to set the budget, to approve the budget by a vote at one of their meetings, which will be televised as well, and also to set the mill rate. So the in-person meeting requirement of the annual meeting is prohibited, and therefore there is no reason to have the annual meeting, because that's the only thing that is on this year's, that would have been on this year's agenda had it not been for the coronavirus episode. So that's basically the rules. I hope I was clear enough, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
This is Sandy. Jerry, you mentioned about sending the budget to all town residents. Are
Yes.
you planning on, or is Tony planning on sending the physical copy to each household?
I can actually speak to that.
ahead,
Our
Tony.
plan is to put the complete budget online, which should be hopefully within the next week or so, and then to mail a summary pamphlet as we do each year to each household.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it's got to be online 7 days before the annual, the preliminary budget hearing. And my mistake, we always send out a summary of the budget, which will go to each resident, each household. And then
Anyone
the only
else?
thing left will be for the Board of Finance to meet after the preliminary budget hearing and actually vote on the budget.
So, Joe Dye, can you guys hear me now? Hopefully.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, welcome.
Okay, I finally solved my issue, I guess.
Could you hear us?
Jerry, yes, I can. Fine. I
Good.
could be. So Jerry, Executive Order 7I-13. I just want to be clear that essentially abrogates our charter requirement town meeting, right?
Yes.
So there is no, we're not having a remote town meeting either. There is no town meeting this year.
Right. There is no annual town meeting because there's nothing for the public to vote on. So there's no
Right.
reason to have it. And as a matter of fact, it says, I forget the exact language, but you're correct. We do
Yes.
have to have a preliminary budget hearing because that's an opportunity for residents to talk about the budget and ask questions, but there's nothing that happens
Right.
at the annual meeting that needs to be held.
Right, so they have their public comment right at the preliminary budget hearing, but their rights under the town meeting are abrogated per this executive order.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions for Jerry or Tony at this point, or me?
This is Sandy again. I guess the question would be, given that there might be some limits to public participation, would it be possible to have or could we consider having a joint meeting of the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen to review whatever comments are there and maybe have a joint discussion, knowing that it is the Board of Finance that will eventually approve a budget and a mill rate. But at least it would give us a little more opportunity to interact about what we've heard, people who might have contacted us. I just throw that out as a suggestion.
Well, the executive order is very clear that the budget making authority in a town, which I said is the Board of Finance, votes on the budget and sets the budget. I guess I don't see any prohibition in having the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen participate in that meeting, but that's up to the Board of Selectmen.
You're talking about the Board of this is Beth, participating in the Board of Finance meeting when they set the budget? Or are you asking Sandy for a meeting prior to that evening?
It could be either one of those, knowing that, again, it's the Board of Finance that will approve the budget and set the mill rate. It's just an opportunity for the Board of Selectmen to perhaps discuss what we've heard and actually our comments on the budget, because we actually haven't seen that yet.
So this is Jerry again. I think Beth's idea is a good one. I think that if you want to have an opportunity to meet with the Board of Finance, it should be done prior to the Board of Finance meeting where they actually set the budget. But there is no prohibition on having a joint meeting and discussing this if that's what the board wants.
How do other members of the Board of Selectmen feel about that? Just state your name before you comment, please.
This is Mika. Just want to make sure I'm understanding what's put forth there. Are we saying, when you say feel about that, are we saying to have a Board of Selectmen meeting only to discuss the budget prior to the Board of Finance Board making a decision on it? Or are we saying have some sort of a joint session?
I'm asking your opinion for either
Yeah.
way.
I mean, personally, I'm proposing that we do it with the Board of Finance because I would like to understand some of the background behind some of their budget changes that were made.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be better if we were all together.
So
Discussing it. Go on.
Beth, you're proposing following the preliminary budget hearing, which will take place on April 20th, and we've received the comments from the public, having a meeting prior to the Board of Finance having their meeting to set the mill rate. Is that correct? We have a joint meeting. I think that's easy to do.
That's
If
correct, Beth.
Okay.
So this is Jerry, I think I understand what Sandy says. And again, there's no prohibition in the executive orders from you to do that, but keep in mind, it's up to the Board of Finance will have some input as to whether you can't force to have a joint meeting, but you can not request that they have a joint meeting. And I guess the ultimate decision is between the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance.
Joe Dye here. I would concur with Sandy. I think it's a great idea. In fact, I would suggest maybe the preliminary budget hearing be a joint meeting, as well as then having a meeting jointly to discuss it. I mean, we're abrogating the citizens' rights by town meeting. It seems to me the Board of Selectmen should therefore have some continuing interaction in this process. So I agree with Sandy.
So Joe, just one point on what you just said. This is Jerry again. The preliminary budget hearing is not a meeting of the Board of Finance. That's a special meeting for the town to participate in. And there is really no meeting of either Board of Selectmen or Board of Finance. But if you want the joint meeting, which is perfectly permissible, I guess after the preliminary budget hearing, you can ask the Board of Finance to have a joint meeting with you before they actually have the meeting to set the budget. And it's up to them to decide to say, yeah, of course we'll meet, or no, we feel we don't need to meet. I guess it's going to be their decision, but you can strongly recommend that that's what you want.
Well, my position would be to recommend that, yes. And then the preliminary budget hearing then is just an informational town hearing.
Correct. It's not a Board of Finance meeting, or it's not a Board of
Okay.
Selectmen meeting. It's just the
Right.
preliminary budget hearing.
I got it. Okay.
It's also an opportunity for the residents at that point to make their comments and get their questions answered related to the budget, the preliminary budget. Will be sent out to you.
I'm
Right.
also,
So, Joe Dye again, so those questions would be answered by whom?
Those questions are usually answered by the person who runs the preliminary budget hearing, which is the chair of the Board of Finance, together with Tony is usually there to answer the technical questions.
Okay.
And Beth is also the first selectman, usually makes a statement or is there certainly to answer any questions that's addressed to her.
Right.
So the Board of Selectmen would be there just as residents at that point.
Usually the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance are there. They're sitting up at the front, but the meeting is really run by the chair of the Board of Finance.
Okay. So I'm cool with that, Joe Dye again, and then also following with Sandy to have that additional meeting thereafter, joint meeting of the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
Well, this is Dwight. It's Dwight.
Yeah, go
I also agree with that. I think a joint meeting is very important.
Okay, following the preliminary budget hearing?
Correct.
So it could be any, it doesn't have to be the same night. It could be it'd probably be easy to set it up in terms of.
Yeah.
No, I don't think, this is Sandy, it should not be the same night. I think we need an opportunity to digest what we've heard.
I completely agree. This is Beth. By following, I meant on another night. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is Jerry again. One more, if this is what you want and it's perfectly permissible, Joe, I would suggest, and Beth and everybody else, that you vote on the motion that Executive Order 7B and 7I is required. That I think Beth has a motion, and then you have a separate motion where you recommend that the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance meet jointly before they set the budget in order to discuss comments made at the preliminary budget hearing. I think they should be two separate motions.
That sounds good.
Yep.
With everyone's
Fine.
permission, I'm going to read what I drafted a motion with Jerry's help this afternoon for tonight's meeting. So I will read it and try to be clear. And if you can't hear me or there's a question, please stop me. I'll start. It is hereby moved that in accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Orders 7B and 7I, the town proceed with the following budget process for July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021 fiscal year. Number 1, the preliminary budget hearing shall take place on April 20th, 2020, and the in-person open meeting requirement for the meeting is suspended, and any in-person access to the meeting will not be permitted. The preliminary budget hearing will proceed remotely by conference call, video conference, or other technology. The draft proposed budget will be posted on the town website prior to the budget hearing, and the public will be permitted to email to the town any comments on the proposed budget. Number 2, in accordance with Executive Order 7I, the Board of Selectmen hereby authorizes the budget-making authority of the town, i.e. the Board of Finance, to adopt a budget for the July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021 fiscal year without holding any votes of taxpayers at an annual town meeting as set forth in the town charter. The annual meeting will not be held. Subsequent to members of the Board of Finance voting for it and adopting the budget, the Board of Finance shall set the mill rate for the July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021 fiscal year. 3, the first selectman and the administrative officer shall establish all necessary procedures to carry out this motion. Any
I'll second.
comments?
This is Sandy. I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Is there comments now? Anyone like me to read any again?
No, I'm just trying to, again, it's a complex motion, but I think what we're saying is we're following Executive Order 7I-13 and authorizing the Board of Finance in accordance therewith, and they are also bound to by Order 7B as set forth in 7I-13 to follow 7B. In other words, is that really what we're doing, Jerry?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, Joe, you mentioned 7I-13. I think I left out the subsection 13 in the order. So Beth, you can just amend it and make sure we say, whenever I say 7I, put section 13, so that'll be clear what section we're talking about.
Right,
Okay.
and 13 refers back to Order 7B, so
Correct.
the Board of Finance has to follow 7B as well, so, okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think if that's the sum and substance of it, I'm okay with it. So.
And Jerry, this is Mika. Just for all intent and purposes, this is what we need to do based on the fact that we can't get together and do it the way we normally would, correct?
Correct. You can't have an in-person meeting at all during this period of time.
It's Joe again. Well, actually, the vote is, we're actually mandated by the order to do it.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
There was a question when this was adopted as to whether this would be permissive or mandatory on the towns, and it was decided overwhelmingly that it should be mandatory, that all towns should have the same procedure set up, rather than some towns trying to have public hearings where it's really inappropriate and contrary to the governor's orders of not congregating together. So these are mandatory. It says the Board of Selectmen shall authorize the budget making authority to adopt the budget.
Right.
Yeah, just
So-
wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, Joe, again, just to follow up, I guess, so the order actually mandates the abrogation of the town meeting requirement as well. In other words,
Correct.
it would be, okay, that's cool. I mean, it would be very cumbersome to have one of those by Zoom or some other platform, but just to be clear.
Also, Joe, this is Jerry again. It's especially cumbersome for Woodbridge because we have that unique requirement that says unless you have 250 people, you can't
Right.
modify the budget presented, and it's virtually impossible to count 250 people remotely under any system, Zoom or otherwise.
Right. Okay.
This is Sandy. Since we will not have an annual town meeting, which normally is when the Board of Finance sets the mill rate and approves the budget, do we want to have a date by which we would like the Board of Finance to do such as that? Do that?
Say
Is
that
that
again.
set up in
Sandy,
the
didn't hear.
charter, Jerry?
This is Jerry and Tony. I think there's some Amity Regional Board of Education concerns about when the date is, right?
That's correct. We have to wait until the Amity Regional School District budget is adopted by the board, and I believe that's somewhere around the first week of May, at least tentatively at the moment.
Yeah. Tony and I had a preliminary discussion with Superintendent Byers morning, and they're thinking about the first week in May.
Joe Dye again, isn't our town meeting typically around May 2020, somewhere in the third week of May, something like that?
Is correct, yep. It's scheduled for, I think, May 18th this year.
Mhm.
So to
Yep.
Sandy's question, couldn't we set some sort of date like that?
Well, it's got to be after the Jerry again, it's got to be after the Amity Board sets their budget, so we can incorporate that number into our budget and the ultimate. So
Right.
I think Tony believes it's going to be sometime around May 4th, but we're not sure. So that's where we got to be a little flexible as to when
Right,
they
but if
adopt
we
their
had,
budget.
if we had a town meeting, we would be, that date's already set, and then we would have to flex around it, but why not have a date? We always do every year.
Even if
I
we
have-
say by May 18th or by May 20th. I
Right.
just
Oh, yeah.
think that we ought to have some direction in our motion about a date by which the budget is approved by the Board of Finance.
It should be no later than May 18th, which is the date that we would ordinarily have our annual meeting.
Correct.
I think that should be the outside
Well,
date.
So at
This
the
is
end,
Sandy,
this
that,
is-
oh, go ahead,
So
Beth.
perhaps at the end of that sentence, subsequent to members of the Board of Finance voting for and adopting the budget, the Board of Finance shall set the mill rate for the July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021 by May.
No later than
No
May
later than.
18th.
May,
May 18th.
okay. Great, 2020. All right, I
Thank-
will add
thank
that.
you.
Okay, that's great. And so, any other comments? We have another motion that we're going to do related to the joint meeting, but is everybody comfortable with the changes and the motion as read? Any more
Yes.
questions? Okay, I've called the motion. Sandy seconded it. I will now call on you individually to vote aye or nay. Mika Cardozo,
Aye.
Joe Crisco,
Aye.
Joe Dye,
Aye.
Beth Heller, aye. Dwight Rowland,
Aye.
Sandy Stein.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we have the opportunity to, we have action under, as appropriate. I guess we can have, we don't have to have another discussion, Jerry, related to the second motion. Is that correct?
No, somebody should make the motion and then you can vote on it.
Okay, Sandy, would you like to make the motion?
Sure, this is Sandy. I would like to make a motion that the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance have a joint meeting to discuss the preliminary budget and the comments that were made at the preliminary budget conference prior to the Board of Finance making a final decision about the mill rate and the fiscal year 21 budget.
Crisco second.
Okay, any discussion on that motion? Anything to add?
Oh, only a question, because Jerry, Joe Dye, Jerry had mentioned that the Board of Finance doesn't have to agree to the joint meeting, and I don't know, I'll take his word for that, but I don't know why, as the governing body, the Board of Selectmen of this town, we can't require that.
Well, Joe, this is Jerry. Joe, I just said that without any basis in the charter or the ordinances or
Right.
law. I just don't know whether the Board of Finance can require them to meet. I think maybe you can, but the strong recommend, short of having them brought into a meeting, I don't know if they decide they don't want to put an agenda up in a notice.
Okay.
I guess they can say no, but it would be unusual for them to say no.
Well, this is Sandy. I mean, when we have joint meetings all throughout the year on various topics and specifically on to hear all of the budgets. So who actually sets those up? I mean, where does that origin come from? Those joint meetings?
Usually the joint meetings, as I understand it, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, are set up by the Board of Finance. Is that correct?
It actually depends on the topic.
Right.
Okay,
If it's a selectman, you know, are driving the meeting and are interested in the topic, sometimes they'll invite the Board of Finance. If it's a financial issue, sometimes it sort of all depends on the topic.
So why can't we set this up as a Board of Selectmen meeting, the Board of Selectmen calling a joint meeting with the Board of Finance, and then it's our meeting, because we want to review with them the budget before they actually vote on it and set it and determine the mill rate.
I
This is
think
Mika, and this is Mika, just to add to that, specifically because of the extenuating circumstances that are occurring in this particular time, it seems as if that would be appropriate.
right.
So
I
Joe,
agree.
this is Jerry again. Let me just say, I can't recall a time when anybody ever denied to meet in have a joint meeting. So I just threw that out because it is very remote. I assume that they're going to say yes. But when we have joint meetings, there's got to be agendas by both the Board of Selectmen for their meeting and an agenda posted by the full Board of Finance for their meeting, or else there is a conflict with FOI rules.
Okay, well, we can set that up. I agree.
Well, except when we do the joint budget meetings, there's only one agenda.
This
When
is
you
Beth.
do the joint.
Oh,
No, there's
yeah,
two.
there is just one
No,
agenda.
there's two. There's always got to be two.
I
There's
do
two?
a note, this is Jerry. I
Uh-huh.
send a notice to the town clerk of the Board of Selectmen meeting, and I file Karen's minutes of the meeting, also an exact copy of them as Board of Selectmen minutes. You approve
Okay.
those at subsequent meetings.
No, okay, I appreciate that, but the only agendas I've ever seen was one. I've only had one
You're right.
agenda.
Hearings, this is Beth. They're budget hearings, and it's one agenda, as far as I understand. I for that.
That's all I've
But
ever
it does
seen.
get filed in both places.
Okay,
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
but it's a single agenda. This is Beth,
Correct.
correct? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
So why don't we just attempt to do it that way?
Right. I don't, Joe Dye again. I don't think they'll decline the meeting either. I'm just suggesting that the motion say it's a Board of Selectmen meeting, a Board of Selectmen calling a joint meeting with the Board of Finance. That's all.
Okay with me. This is Beth. Anybody else?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Wait.
All right. So we
It
have a
is what it is.
motion and a second. I will now call the members to aye or nay. Mika Cardozo,
Aye.
Joe Crisco,
Aye.
Joe Dye,
Aye.
Beth Heller, aye. Dwight Rowland,
Aye.
Sandy Stein.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. It passes unanimously. I think we've completed all of our agenda. Anyone have anything else to add?
No.
Stay safe.
Stay
I
safe.
just want to thank everyone for putting up with all this, and I think it's going quite well considering, and thank PUA and everyone else for putting this together this evening, and Jerry for doing the minutes, and Betsy and Tony and everyone else in the background getting this all done for us. So thank you very much. Everyone keep safe, and good night.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.